sir. Welcome to COASTER-net Uncut.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of COASTER-net Uncut. I am, of course, Andrew Barchak from Chicago, Illinois, joined once again by my co-host, Danny Miller, hailing from Rochester, New York. Danny, how is it going?
I'm doing okay, as you might be able to tell. I'm getting some natural light in from the side here. We're recording at an off time around a Saturday morning here. I've got hockey a little bit later today, so we're going for a Saturday morning. And we're going to talk about some roller coasters. It's been a while since you and I, it's been a couple weeks since you and I have found a time to get together. You know, we're busy people. I'm finishing up school. You've got stuff going on at work and school. You know, you've got stuff going on. But we said, hey, let's get on Uvu here this morning and let's talk about some roller coasters. And I think we've got a good topic. We've got a good interactive topic where we had lots of responses from people. We're going to talk about the North American Giga coasters. We're just going to kind of pretend that Steel Dragon doesn't exist for the most part. I think a few people mentioned it, but we're going to talk about Fury 325, Millennium Force, Intimidator 305, and Leviathan. And the reason that we're doing this show is because, Andy, you and I have both now ridden all four of the North American Giga coasters. This is a topic that you and I talked about a long time ago about doing, and we said, well, let's do it in the off-season after we get to ride all of them, because you hadn't ridden Leviathan, I-305 yet, and I hadn't, neither of us had ridden Fury because it was new this year. So, you know, it's kind of a good time to do this, and we also got input from a lot of the fans out there. So I think it'll be a good topic to discuss.
Well, to be honest with you, I think the interesting part of this is that, you know, I had obviously ridden Millennium Force before, but the three new Gigas of Leviathan, I-305, and Fury, I rode, I rode Leviathan in June for Coasting for Kids, and then Fury and I-305, I rode those in I actually read both of those in the same day. That I was in Charlotte in the morning. I had 14 awesome rides in the ERT session for Fury, and then I drove up to King's Dominion and got about 10 more on I-305 for the evening session. And
that's a good day.
It's a good day. It's a good day when you have that happen. But you know,
it's a great day.
It's kind of this topic now where before, you know, you had Millennium, you had Leviathan, you had I-305, but now all of a sudden Fury, I think, really changes that mix a little bit. And first I want to say I think all four of them, all four of them are very different from each other, and I think that might be the most important part. Is all four are pretty different. Now we've always made comparisons between Leviathan and Millennium. You know, I hear you talking about that all the time, but after having ridden Leviathan, I don't really like that comparison. I can see how you make it, but I don't really. I
make it layout wise. They have very different feels. I will give you that. But layout wise, they do kind of the same stuff in a slightly different order. But I think generally speaking, I know where you're going with this. I think Millennium does. Millennium does that stuff, I think, a little bit better. I think you get a little bit more force out of it. You get a little bit more speed out of it for the most part. But in terms of the actual maneuvers, I think they're pretty comparable there. I-305 and Fury are kind of just throw them out the window, you know, as far as what they do. We'll talk about those in a little bit. But go ahead. Sorry, finish your point. I know where you're going with that, though.
You know, so I kind of feel that, you know, Millennium's the stronger one of that. You know, but you know what? The other thing we found interesting, I thought that both of us commented on this real quick, was that as we got people's responses in, there's really not a whole lot of consensus amongst enthusiasts even as to what's the best one. You know, a lot of people love Fury, a lot of people love Millennium, a lot of people love I-305. The only real consensus I think we found is that Leviathan is usually regarded as the lesser of the four. You know, and still people even say how much they love Leviathan, but out of those four, it usually took the fourth place spot more so than any other coaster, being talked about in a certain position. So maybe we want to start there. Do you want to start there with some of the responses we got, just to throw it out there? Because I think it's going to lead us into some of this discussion here.
Yeah, so we posted on the Coaster Consortium, and then I also posted on my personal Facebook page, and got a lot of responses in those two spots. So we'll just go through down there. Dan Glauser wrote in, and he said he's ridden I-305 and Millennium Force, and he thinks I-305 is the better of the two there. That's something that I agreed with for a while until riding Millennium Force again over Labor Day weekend this year. I now have Millennium Force back above I-305 by a slight margin. So that's interesting because they're very different. I think I-305, we always talk about how, Rob Decker always talked about how they married Maverick on the back end of the Millennium Force lift hill, and that's kind of where they came up with I-305. And it's funny because I think most people think Maverick is better than both of them. Well, maybe not most people, but a lot of people think Maverick is better than both of them. You would think you're combining two great rides, that maybe the love child of those two might be the best, but that's not necessarily the case for some people. Brian Verbal, we always discuss how we actually pronounce his last name, but he said he's only been on Millennium Force, and he's been on 107 coasters, and he ranks at number 45. He likes the first drop, the sensation of speed, and the airtime at the end of the ride, but for the most part, he says Millennium Force doesn't really do anything for him. So he says, put him in the hater group that calls it Millennium Forceless. That's what he thinks. So, and that's something that, you hear that from some people. Some people don't like the speed thing. If you're an all-out Force person, which I think to a certain extent I am, and I think you and I, for the most part, are Force people, but you also like having that sensation of speed, and I think I've learned to appreciate that sensation of speed a little bit more as time has gone on, because not every ride can be Maverick, not every ride can be I-305, not every ride can be Banshee where it's pummeling you with forces the entire way. So I think maybe that's why Millennium Force has continued to move back up my list now that I've kind of, get to a new variety of coasters, and you realize that not every coaster can be one where you're graying out all the time. So I think I've learned to appreciate that sensation of speed as well. Ryan Trout, he's been on Leviathan and Millennium Force, and he actually gives Leviathan a slight edge over Millennium Force. So that's interesting there. He's actually got Leviathan slightly ahead of Millennium Force as far as the two he's ridden. Chris Brucker, a buddy of mine from school here up at RAT, he's been on all four, and his ranking goes I-305, Fury 325, Leviathan, and Millennium Force in that order. So that's interesting as well. Most of the people here we're seeing kind of put Leviathan as the weakest, but he actually has Millennium Force as the weakest. And talking to him a little bit, I think we found that he is very much a Force guy, so it's not surprising that I-305 and Fury would be the top two on his list, and then, Leviathan and Millennium being a little bit farther down. My Aunt Sue wrote in, and here's what she said. She's one of the ones that actually went through and explained everything, which is good. Right now she has it Fury, Leviathan, Millennium Force, and I-305. She said we did have some outstanding rides on Millennium during Labor Day, but she put Fury at the top because it has a little bit of everything and it doesn't quit. I-305 has some of the gray out sensation, which we talk about all the time, but some people don't like that, but she likes it. She likes that Millennium Force has some airtime. She liked Leviathan, but she wrote it in the cold because we had ERT at night at Roller Coasters A. And she said she eventually actually got a headache from riding it so much in the cold because we sat on it like 14 times. So she'd like to kind of get all four of them in on ideal conditions. But so she has Fury at the top, followed by Leviathan, Millennium, and then I-305. Sam Natcher, he took that really nice photo in the calendar for us of Fury 325. Excuse me. So, we get to plug the calendar a little bit there. There's still a few of them left, too, if you want the calendar. So, maybe Andy can put up that real nice picture of Fury 325 real quick, because Sam has Fury at the top. He's been on Fury, Millennium, and I-305, and he ranks them in that order. He says that those three coasters are his top three steel coasters. So he goes Fury 325, Millennium, and then I-305. So that's interesting. Jarrett Brown, he's been on all four. He goes Fury, Millennium, Leviathan, and then I-305. So that's interesting. How different all of these can be. Cole Klima wrote in. He's just been on Fury 325, but it's his number one steel coaster. So I think we're seeing a trend in that if people have ridden Fury, I think a lot of people are putting Fury at the top. It seems to be really either Fury or Millennium Force. It depends on, I guess, the fandom. Some of those. Adam Kaplan has been on all four, and he prefers I-305. He thinks that's the best of the four. So that's again, if you're a Force person, I-305 is probably the most forceful. Either that or Fury, depending on what type of forces you're lower. But it's again personal preference here. Jim Winslet said, I didn't realize until just now that I had been on all of them, but this is how he puts it. He goes Fury, Leviathan, I-305, and then Millennium Force. So Jim, writing in that he is Fury at the top, followed by Leviathan. So he's got the two B&Ms ahead of the two Intamins. So that's another interesting way to go about it there. Mark Lacombe, he said he's been on three. He's actually been on Steel Dragon 2000, and he's also been on I-305 and Leviathan. He says the Steel Dragon was the world's tallest family coaster. So I don't know if that's a good thing, or I guess not when we're talking about forceful coasters and intense coasters. He said he can't really be a good judge of I-305 because he wrote it when it had the trims on the first drop, so he can't properly rank that one, and he says Leviathan was okay. So really not a whole lot of praise for any of those three. Maybe if he gets on I-305 again without the trims on the first drop, he'll have a little bit better stuff to say. And then the last one from Facebook here is actually Matt Summers, and I believe he's the one from England. He's been on Fury, I-305, and Millennium. He said Fury has the best feeling of constant speed. I-305 is a G-force machine, and Millennium Force is more about the height and speed and the gracefulness of it, in his opinion. So that's kind of how he goes about. That's how he goes about going with those. So I mean, a lot of people just on Facebook putting in different opinions, and as we said before, a lot of varying viewpoints and really not a whole lot of consensus. I think the people who have been on Fury, generally speaking, think Fury is either number one or number two. I don't think anyone put Fury lower than two out of the four. And, there are a few people like Leviathan, but I think the people who have ridden Leviathan might put it a little lower. So we had some people on the forums, so why don't you, I've read enough of these. Why don't you read some of the ones off the forums? Or
before we get into the responses, maybe we talk a little bit about what we think here. Okay. I think the problem with Leviathan is, and it's the one thing that I think could have made Fury a perfect roller coaster, as opposed to just a really, really good roller coaster. And it's Leviathan has an amazing first half.
Speed hill.
And maybe a first quarter. Because the first drop into that speed hill may be one of the best 1-2 punch elements on any roller coaster anywhere. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head that even remotely comes close to that first drop into that first speed hill on any other ride. Can you? I can't think of anything that rivals that.
No, I mean, I always said that Leviathan was the best first drop of any coaster I've been on, except for maybe Apollo's Chariot in the very back seat. But I think front to back, we're not getting into it now. But front to back, I think the first drop on Leviathan it's the take your breath away type of drop where it knocks the wind out of you. And I don't know. I don't know if maybe, I don't know what it is, because it's probably shaped exactly the same, and it's probably exactly the same drop, just a little bigger. But maybe it's just because it was more surprising, and I didn't expect it on Leviathan, and I expected it out of Fury. But it was more surprising on Leviathan, and again, maybe that's because, knowing how similar the two first drops are, maybe I just expected it on Fury and got it, so I wasn't surprised by it. But with Leviathan, the first drop into that tunnel, and then you have that big turnaround, which is similar to what Fury has. It doesn't have the slight left foot and the airtime whip. We talk about, if you watch a Fury documentary, you hear Rob Decker talk about how you get the airtime out of the bank, and it's kind of 305 does, where it does the real quick directional change and throws you out of your seat. Maverick does it too. Leviathan doesn't have anything like that. It just kind of banks into its turn, whereas Fury kind of fakes you out that it can do that maneuver. And on Leviathan, after that turnaround, it goes down into that real small speed hill that Millennium Force also has a similar element, and then on the backside of it, it banks to the left and then goes into a big airtime hill. And that's kind of the one thing we said, just right from the start when they first announced Fury, we said, well, if Fury had one of those hills, it would really break up the banks on the first half of Fury. And you know what? We said that, and I said that up until I rode Fury, and then I said to myself, you know what? You get some really nice thrower airtime in all those transitions and all those banks. I was afraid that there was going to be no airtime whatsoever in the first half of Fury, and there's a lot of it. I've never gotten so much airtime on a coaster where on a section of coaster where you never actually went over a hill. Yeah. I mean, it was mind-boggling to me that they could perfect that thrower air. I did this when I tried to describe Fury to people. I say, take the train of Leviathan, take the smoothness of a B&M coaster and the comfort of the trains and the restraints, put it on a ride with the speed of Millennium Force, and it's got the intensity of I-305. It's got the same maneuvers. You've got a few airtime hills. You've got some thrower airtime hills. You've got some really intense, sustained, positive G moments, and that's kind of how I described Fury to the people who hadn't ridden it. So I think I'm not as upset about the lack of a speed hill on Fury now as I was before I rode it, and that's why we say we try to never rank coasters before we ride them, because you have no idea, how the little surprises like that, turn out. So at the end of the day, I'm not upset that there's not a speed hill on Fury, and
do you think the speed hill would make it better? Because I think the speed hill takes Fury from a very good coaster to a perfect coaster. Because, and I know at some level you just don't want to replicate what you did on a different ride, and maybe people would criticize, Fury more for cloning Leviathan and just changing the back end. I don't know, but that Leviathan speed hill is so well done that
it is.
I think adding it somewhere onto Fury in the first half, but then you worry about, does it change the pace of the rest of the ride? Would that speed hill slow it down a little bit? And then you don't have the awesome speed going into the treble clef turn.
Yeah, I think at this point, the way I think it's so surprising at the fact that you get airtime out of these bank turns. I almost think that I think you would still get the same airtime, and I think it would be the same sort of feel and the same element. But at the same time, I don't think it would be to get airtime out of a hill that small when you're going that fast. So maybe it loses a little bit of its shock factor. In terms of the ride, I think it might just be interchangeable in terms of the sensations that you're getting. You're getting some airtime, and then, you go into some sort of bank turn, and then you would get, your positive G's. So there's that. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think trading it out for the speed hill would make it any better or any worse. I think it might be a one-to-one trade-off, but I think it might lose some of its surprise factor. The fact that you're getting airtime out of a bank turn or a transition that, we know that I-305 did it, but B&M has never really done anything like that before. So to see them perfect that so well, I think is more surprising, and I think maybe it actually turned out for the better. So I don't know if it would make it a better ride, in my opinion.
Well, let's go to some other responses here. On Twitter, we had Nathan Firesheets, and he says Fury is the best, and he has 305 and Millie right next to each other, and basically, he says that Fury gets it for being completely rewritable, and I'm gonna agree on that point. Where I'm a guy who marathons stuff a lot, and I-305 I thought kicked my ass more than any other coaster over a long term. By about ride 8 or 9, like I said, I think we got about 10 in on the evening. By about 8 or 9, it's that constant graying out off of that first drop. Into the first turn and then into the first the next airtime hill, where you it's more than just a gray out. People talk about the blackout. It's really I wouldn't say it's a complete blackout. It's definitely one step above the gray out, where it becomes uncomfortable after a while. And the other thing that I thought I was going to love I-305, and maybe it was because I rode it right after Fury, because we always talk about the order in which you ride things, and having ridden Fury that morning, I had a very good one-to-one comparison there by the evening hours, and I just felt that the length really hurt that ride as well, that you do the first few maneuvers, and then you go into that first set of trims, and it kind of like kills all that first speed, and then you go into the second half, and you're doing all these crazy maneuvers where I think if you were going even faster, man, that would be crazy. But I don't know. I just didn't feel I-305 that the way I have them ranked is I have Fury at 4, and then I have Millennium Force at 6, and then I have I-305 at 10, and then Leviathan coming right behind that at like 11 or 12. So they're all in my top 15, but it's just,
right, which is good considering how many rides you've been on.
Yeah, exactly. Something about I-305, just, I agree that I just don't think it is super rewritable. That Fury you can sit on all day. Millennium Force you can sit on all day. I've done it. I've had 20 rides in the span of an hour and a half on Millennium Force at different events before. You can sit on it all day and still be quite comfortable at the end of those rides. But I-305, I don't think you could sit on that for 2 hours straight. I just don't think that'll happen. But let's go to some other responses here. So off the forums, we got a Super Bet BPY, and he's ridden 3 out of the 4 of them. Fury 325 is his number. It's his top of the Gigas. His number 3 overall. He says the first drop, the intensity, the airtime you were just talking about, and he specifically calls out the treble clef turn. That is just out of this world amazing, especially in the first row on the left hand, I believe it is.
Yes, left hand side, front left.
Yeah, the front left is just out of this world amazing in that seat for the whole ride, actually. And then Millennium Force is number 8 overall. He once again talks about the speed of that ride, that Millennium Force is a speed coaster. If you don't like speed coasters, Millennium Force is not going to be the ride for you because it's all about speed on those huge turnarounds out on the island. That is not about anything else besides giving you that sense of speed. And then he has I-305 his number 9 overall. So Millennium and I-305 for him are right there next to each other. He says, once again, it's the most intense. But once again, after 6 or 7 times, he was pretty much done of it. So, that's that. And then we have Bedholm, one of our good friends, the winner of the 2015 COASTER-net Uncut draft that you guys probably have watched by this point. He's been on all 4, and he loves I-305. So, he's all about that intensity. So his I-305, his number 5 overall, Millennium Force, his number 8 overall, comes next. And then Fury, he actually had it ranked 3rd of the Gigas, where he's one of the people that has put Fury down.
Well, he is an Intamin fan. He is a big Intamin fan.
Yeah. But then again, he has Millennium Force 8 overall, Fury 9 overall, and then Leviathan, he has number 28 overall. That it's once again, first half really good, second half a whole lot of nothing, pretty much. And I think if there's looking at how Leviathan was done, does anyone dispute that the second half is pretty unimpressive overall?
I don't think so.
Up north,
see, here's the thing. I
even said that maybe Leviathan isn't the best ride in the park. That maybe Behemoth is the best ride in the park.
You know what? Roller Coasters A. I enjoyed Behemoth more than I enjoyed Leviathan. I moved. So the way I rank them is I have Fury number 2. I have Millennium Force number 6. I have I-305 number 9, and then Leviathan is number 11. Leviathan was number 10. I moved Behemoth up to number 10 between I-305 and Leviathan. Now, again, I said that it was rather cold up there, and it was raining a little bit, so not optimal conditions for, Leviathan is a much better warm weather coaster. Because you do get some more speed. Behemoth, for me, has always been a cold weather coaster. I always have my best rides on Behemoth in the fall when I go up there for Roller Coasters A in September. And I enjoyed Behemoth more than Leviathan on this last trip. And I think it kind of depends. I ask a lot of people who go up there a lot, and a lot of varying opinions. My buddy Jordan up there, who's the big Canada's Wonderland guy, he does not disagree that Fury blows Leviathan out of the water. He says Fury is it is a spectacular coaster, and Leviathan is kind of like Fury light, I guess. I mean, obviously it was built first, but Fury, he said, just took it to a whole nother level from Leviathan. And I think Leviathan is great right up until you get to the hammerhead that's out in front of the park entrance, because I think the hammerhead is so high that it kind of burns off a lot of that speed, and then it has that bank turn, that really drawn-out bank turn that goes down into the second airtime hill, and I think that sequence is where it loses enough speed, at least in the cold weather, where you don't get the great airtime on the second hill. It's just kind of the floater there, and then that last turn, you take it a little bit slow. I think if everything after the first drop and the first turn and then that speed hill, if everything after that on Leviathan, starting with the big airtime hill, was shrunk by like 10 or 15%, I think you would have a really, really intense ride. I think everything is just a little bit too big and a little bit too drawn out in that second half. I think that's kind of the knock on Leviathan.
I'll also say say this about Leviathan is, for Coasting for Kids, we had, I forgot, like an hour on it or something like that. And we probably got between 8 to 10 rides on it. And about half the time, I was always expecting something else when we hit the brakes. I don't know why. I just felt like there was supposed to be something else there, another hill.
There should be something else.
And it's like, every time I hit the brakes, I'm like, oh, yeah, these are the brakes. It's over. So it's kind of like, it's got that weird feel to it where you think there should be something else there. But Adam Beard wrote a whole bunch here. He's been on 3.
Yes.
I-305 and then Millennium. And he has all ranked pretty closely together, 2, 4, and 5. So that's all really tight.
How about that?
He says Fury's the best overall, with unique elements, speed, airtime, the ejector air that you were talking about. And the perfect marriage of elements and airtime and piecing it all together. And I think that's one of the things that Fury does have, is Fury does have a nice pace to it that you start
yes, it does.
off with the very intense ride, the speed, the treble clef, that turn, and then you move into the second half, which is all about the airtime and all about the floater air. I really wish those trims did not hit on that first floater air hill.
Yeah. And they didn't when they had trims on the first drop. So, and then when they put the trims off the first drop, they put them back on that hill. So it's like pick your poison with that. I mean, they're going to slow it down somewhere. So it just sucks that they had to put them somewhere.
But why? Why slow it down?
I don't know.
Anywhere?
I mean,
I don't get that.
I don't know. There's a reason for it, I'm sure, but.
Yeah, but it's just really
it really ruins the pace. You're going at this blazing speed the entire time, and then it's kind of like, we're gonna not be as intense here.
It's like, okay, it's like intermission, and then it's like intermission, and let's move into a second movement here. It's just so different of a ride from the first and second half too. And then he says about I-305 that it was his favorite steel coaster for a bit. Because it's just about intensity and speed. He complains about the ridiculously strong trims as well, that hit towards the middle of the ride. That's and then you get that towards the end of the ride too. I don't know. I just rode I-305 this year, so I didn't get to experience in any other form with the hard restraints or whatever. But it does seem that these parks, in general, to me, I think the parks are hitting the trims way too much. When you design a ride, it's like, are you designing it to slow it? I don't know. Whatever. It's probably because of the lack of.
Well, the trims are always an interesting point because I talked just a minute ago about the trims on I-305, and Adam mentioned the trims on Fury as well. I remember down at the Coaster Crew event back in July, we were talking to Mike Fanel a little bit about Fury, and he said he's like yeah, when we designed it, because there's not a mid-course, you have to have a trim somewhere to make sure that you have a good control on the speed. If it's going, balls to the wall really fast, you need to be able to get it within your window. Because the way they do it, they have a certain window of time that it needs to take if it's, for a train to complete a cycle. If it's too slow, you risk valleying. If it's too fast, then you have maintenance issues in terms of wear and tear on the parts. So you have to have a good control on that, and I think that's probably why you're looking at trims. He said there's never a good spot for a trim brake. He said he's a coaster guy. He's like the late Will Cook in some regards. In that Mike Fanel is a coaster guy, and he said there's never a good spot for a trim brake. But I think we put it in a spot where it doesn't completely ruin what comes after it, because you have so much speed at that point that even trimming it down a little bit, you still have incredible airtime on all 3 hills. in that second half, and it's better than putting it at the bottom of a drop. So and it's a mag trim on Fury, so you're at least losing speed while you're going up a hill. And since it's a magnetic trim, you don't hear the of the brakes actually clamping down. So maybe it's a little bit less noticeable, and the airtime is still good. So I mean, there's that.
You know where my favorite trim is out of any coaster?
I know exactly what you're going to say here.
It's in the Cedar Point maintenance shed where it was supposed to be on Millennium Force, but they never installed it. That's my favorite trim of that.
That's what I was going to get to. So you have it on Fury, you have it on I-305, and then Millennium on that little straightaway before the last overbank, they have the mounting brackets on the track for the trim. They just never put it on. And it just goes storming right through. Well, and Leviathan has two of them. Leviathan has two trims, and they use both of them. So, maybe that's part of it, too.
So back to Adam Beard. He says,
I'll agree with that all day.
Yeah. Millennium Force, he says, is the least exciting for him, which it's all about speed, but it ends there. I don't know. Like, people always complain about Millennium Force, and I think, this gets back to my point before is, if there's one thing I would love to do, I would love to re-ride a coaster for the first time, to capture that sense of, hey, this is a brand new ride. And I think Millennium Force has become that ride that people have ridden so much. People have been on,
they're jaded.
You forget how good of a ride it is. The hills going out to the island and the hills coming back from the island, both of them give you just as much airtime as any of the hills on Fury do, as any of them. Like, I'm sorry, it's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
But people tend to ignore it. I don't know if it's because they're being stapled with the hydraulics. I don't know. But you get just as much airtime, plus those wide overbank turns, out on the island. It gives you such a sense of speed. And then the little mini airtime hill across from the station, I still think is one of my favorite hills or elements on any coaster. It's just so much fun. If you're really rocking on that ride and you really have a good amount of speed coming back from the island and you hit that hill, there's nothing like it in the world. You just fly right over that hill, and it's amazing. And I just feel that people forget how good of a ride Millennium Force is, and I am guilty of that. 3 years ago, I had Millennium ranked like 12 or 15, and then I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. If I'm going to ride a ride, I'm probably going to choose Millennium over a lot of this other junk on my list. And I use the term junk or whatever. But, when it comes down to, like, Diamondback versus Millennium, Diamondback's a lot of fun, but I'm sorry, Millennium's a better ride. That I think it's
I agree.
So, I think
yeah, if I can jump in real quick, you talk about the airtime. Millennium has great airtime. It doesn't have a lot of it. It doesn't have a lot of hills, but the airtime it does have is very good. I mean, you get some on the first drop, just like you do on Leviathan, Fury, I-305. You've got two really big hills with pretty good airtime. I mean, it's as good or better than airtime on just about any B&M coaster. So we'll say that. And then you have that ejector speed hill at the end that we talk about. And I think the pacing works. But the thing that I've always thought about Millennium Force that I think a lot of people don't talk about is, it's about the speed, but, okay, so when you come down off of, with the exception of the second overbank, Millennium has 4 overbank turns. You've got one after the first drop. You've got one after the big airtime hill that goes to the right, and then you've got one that goes to the left on the island, and then you've got the final one to the right. With the exception of the second one, the other 3 actually give you pretty good positive G-forces at the peak of the hill, especially the last one. And I never understood the people who call it Millennium Forceless. Is it the most intense coaster in the world? Absolutely not. Our Intimidator and Fury are both more intense. I will give you that. I will give you that all day long. I will give you that Millennium Force is a speed-based ride. It's mostly about the speed. But to say that there are no forces on Millennium Force is complete crap. I'm sorry. That's just not true. And if you're one of the ones that call it Millennium Forceless, I don't know what your problem is. I don't know if you've got something against the park. I don't know if you've got something against that ride. I don't know if you've got something against the fanboys. You know, nobody likes fanboys except other fanboys, okay? We know that. Andy and I talk about that off the air all the time. But to not like a ride because it has fanboys, that's not correct. That's not proper. A real coaster enthusiast will recognize what Millennium Force is, and I'm not even going to say it's the greatest ride in the world. It's not my favorite ride in the world. It's in my top 10. It's number 6. It's pretty good. Pretty good on a list of 468. Or, Steel 368, whatever. But to call it a forceless ride, I just don't think is correct because it's got great airtime. It's got some great spots of positive G's. It's got some points where you're just, rolling along and not really doing anything in your seat, but you have the wind in your face. That's fine. I think that makes the pacing really good. And like I said to you, I told you this, when I rode it over Labor Day weekend, I think I had a new appreciation for what Millennium Force was because I had ridden it so much in the last couple of years that you kind of you get jaded. You forget how good of a ride it is. And I think to a certain extent you kind of rediscover that at times with certain rides when you go a while without riding them. So I don't know. That's kind of where I said on that debate. And Millennium is number 2 out of those 4 for me. So I moved it back up above 305.
I think Steel Rock, in our last response here, I think he makes some really pointed statements about Millennium Force, so he ranks it Millennium, Leviathan, I-305 it's ranked as number 4, number 5, and number 11. But he says this to say, Millennium Force doesn't stop. It keeps going full force from start to finish. Out of all the rides that we talk about here, it's the only one that does that. That we've already said, Fury has that second movement. That after you hit those mag brakes, it has a completely different feel to it. Still a great feel, but it's completely different than the first half of the ride. Leviathan, after that turnaround, completely different. I-305, after their mag brakes, completely different. You might be able to say I-305 carries its speed better, maybe. I don't know if I would go on a limb and say that, but maybe
if it didn't have the trim, you could make that argument. Exactly. It's hard to make that argument with that brake there.
Yeah. But Millennium Force, start to finish, does not stop. And the other thing, too, that Millennium Force has is I think those tunnels really work to give you a different sensation on the ride that none of the other ones have. Leviathan has the one mini tunnel that I'm not a huge fan of, to be honest with you. But the other ones don't have anything. But Millennium Force has those 2 tunnels, which I think are pretty cool and add to the overall experience of it. It's just Cedar Point, there's another ride at Cedar Point that doesn't stop either, that I think carries its speed well throughout the whole ride, and that's Maverick. That Maverick, from start to finish, you carry your speed most of the time. Yeah, you stop in the tunnel, but you launch right out of it, and you're right back into it, sometimes going even faster than the first half.
Well, and that's designed. I mean, that's not a trim brake. That's designed, exactly. And that doesn't subtract from the intensity, I don't think.
I think it's an amazing part that you come in there, you come to almost a dead stop, you launch out of that tunnel, and you are automatically back into it. It reminds me a lot of the Voyage trim brakes. That, on the Voyage, you're rocking through the forest on the first half, and you come to those brakes, God bless those brakes, and you hit them, and...
God God bless these brakes. I remember that line. Sorry, we're having a flashback to Hollywood Nights here. Go ahead.
And then you come off and you do the double down, and you're right back into it. I think that's an amazing thing to do, that on a coaster that you can come to almost a dead stop and then be right back into it within 10 seconds of coming off those brakes. That is awesome design. That you don't need to just slightly slow it down, sometimes with these mag brakes or whatever, that you can come to a dead stop and then do a second half and be just as fun as the first half at the same speed, which I think is mind-blowing to me. And that's why I love Voyage. That's why I love Maverick. And it's why I love Millennium, too, to some extent, that you have that full experience from start to finish, that you never, ever, ever slow down without it being designed that way. So, I still rank Fury higher. But it's right there. It's right there. It's 4. Fury's number 4 for me. And then Millennium's number 6 with a little X2 in the middle. So.
So real quick, before we kind of wrap up here, I do have one thing that I'd like to mention, because I've mentioned it with you before, and you talked about it a little earlier about the rewritability and everything. What's interesting to me is, because I've been playing hockey for 13, 14 years now, and I have a history of concussions. I've had 4. I've had 4 diagnosed, let's put it that way. I've probably had 1 or 2 more, getting, well, yeah, thanks. But, what's interesting... Well, yeah, we'll talk... Well, this happens on Manta, too. Yeah. So it's happened on Fury... It's happened on Leviathan. It's happened on Manta. It's happened on I-305. It's happened on. It hasn't happened on Millennium Force to me so much. I haven't been able to marathon Maverick one right after another enough to really tell if Maverick will do it to me. But I get compression headaches, not from rattling and roughness of a coaster, but from intense G-forces. Banshee on Media Day did it to me a lot. When I have these the positive G-forces and, my spine is being compressed because of my history of head injuries, I get compression, neck compression and spine compression headaches. So, during special events where we marathon rides, Fury 325, Banshee, those are 2 that, and I don't subtract anything from these rides because of this, because I know that's something that's just the way my body is. That has nothing to do with whether I like the ride or not, because I had a compression headache and I kept riding Fury because I couldn't get enough of it during ERT at our special event. But Fury will do it, I-305 will do it, Banshee does it to me, even a ride like Goliath at Magic Mountain, or Titan at Six Flags Over Texas, with the intense second halves that those rides have. Not so much Voyage, I think, because Voyage is a lot of airtime. And that's the thing, you and I marathon Voyage at Hollywood Nights in the back seat 7 times in a row, did not get up out of our seat. And I was fine. And again, I think that's because it's a lot of airtime. It's not so much the positive G's, but the positive G's will get to me at some point like that. But that doesn't affect the rewritability for me, because I still rewrite it. But I think that's, and I'm not the only one. My aunt gets them too. And I know other people get them too, especially people who play sports and might have a history of head injuries. So I think that's something interesting. But you brought up the rewritability factor, and I might have mentioned in the past that I've had headaches on Fury 225. Manta does it to me too because of that pretzel loop. I get compression headaches on Manta. You were just riding Manta a couple weeks ago, and you said that pretzel loop is out of this world. And last time we were down there, it was raining. We rode Manta 4 or 5 times in a row, and I had a slight headache in the back of my neck, just from the G's in that pretzel loop. And, it's really a strange sensation, but that's how you know a ride is getting intense. That's the way I kind of look at it. So now the last thing is, I just realized this. Do you and I have the same list for these 4 coasters? Do we both go Fury, Millennium, I-305, Leviathan?
Yes, we do. That's unprecedented.
So we actually agree on something.
Mark this down in the calendar.
Mark it down on your COASTER-net calendar that you need to order.
Oh, absolutely. Order those calendars. So that is quite unusual that we finally have come to a general. It was
on a true consensus.
We come up with enough lists.
40 shows, we finally did it.
Oh, good time.
So, anyway, so I think we've had a good discussion here. You know, we certainly appreciate all the fan feedback. It's been a while since we've done one of these shows where we asked for the opinion of the fans. So I think now that we're getting in close to the off season, I think we're gonna have some time to do some more of these. So please be on the lookout on the forums, on Facebook, Twitter, all that. We'll definitely be doing some more interactive questions where we want you guys to get involved and give us your opinions. Like we said, the calendars are on the website. You can find those. You can get the link to those and purchase those. I think we still got a few of them left. And then also be on the lookout for hopefully by the time this show goes live, we will have the link up for the roller coaster poll. So the Thrilling 32 bracket challenge last year was a huge success. But before we do that, we have to vote for the roller coasters. We have to do our version of the golden tickets. So if you didn't like the golden tickets and you don't get to vote in the golden tickets, this is your chance to have your voice be heard in our poll. This will be the 4th year that we're doing it, and we've had a different winner in both wood and steel every year. And we've had a lot of different people voting, so we're kind of putting the finishing touches on that. It is going to be a Google form. We're discussing whether or not we're going to take Excel spreadsheets just straight up as well. But definitely going to have a Google form. There is a Facebook event. If you're friends with me on Facebook, I'm the host of the event. If you want to be part of the Facebook event, that's where I'm going to post the link. I'll also post it on the website somewhere. But, if you search, let me see what it's listed as. It is listed on Facebook as 2015 COASTER-net roller coaster poll. I believe I do have it set as an open. I believe I do have it set as an open event, so you should just be able to. Search it on Facebook. It's 2015 Coaster, all caps, -net roller coaster poll. I will have the link in there and any information about the poll, and then eventually the bracket challenge will all be in there. So if you're on Facebook, go join that. We've got plenty of people that are already planning on being a part of that, and hopefully by the time this show goes live, we'll have the Google form live so that you guys can start voting and we can get that rolling. And I expect the 4 Gigas to do quite well. Leviathan and I-305 have both won it in the past. Millennium Force has not won it yet, but Intimidator won it 3 years ago. Leviathan won it 2 years ago, and then Bizarro actually won it last year. So we'll see what we can come up with this year, but again, thank you for the interactivity. We really appreciate it. It helps make our show better. So,
as always, thank you for joining us. I'm, of course, Andrew Barchek from Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm Danny Miller from Rochester, New York.
And as always, Ride on, Ride Warriors.
See you next time.